Hi, I'm Jane Trotter. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Northwoods, and I'd like to welcome you to our monthly meeting. This topic of our meeting today is broadband in the Northwoods. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping things. You do need to make sure that you're muted when you enter, and also, if you can, stop your video. Also as a reminder, and this is kind of long, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and fully committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in principle and practice. So there are no barriers to full participation in this organization based on gender identity, ethnicity, Native or Indigenous origin, age, generation, sexual orientation, cultural, religious beliefs, systems, marital status, parental status, socioeconomic status, language, accent, ability status, mental health, education level or background, geography, nationality, work style, work experience, job role function, thinking style. And all of this speaks to our nonpartisan policy. Personality type, physical appearance, political perspective, or affiliation and/or any other characteristics. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to this organization's current and political future success in engaging individuals, household, communities, and policymakers in creating a more perfect democracy. So with that in mind, we would like to remind people when they're doing chat or if asking questions, that the statements be kept as nonpartisan as possible, because we are a nonpartisan organization. Also, we'd like to acknowledge the First Nations, Oneida, the Potawatomi, the Ho-Chunk, and the Ojibwe peoples on whose land we practice democracy. So with that in mind and that long introduction, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Ben Meyer, and he will take it from there, and he'll explain to you about how he'd like to take comments and questions. Ben is the social topics correspondent at WXPR Radio. His current reporting project is called Employed, a series of stories on the changing Northwoods economy. Common topics include broadband expansion, innovation, entrepreneurship, and small business. Prior to that, Ben spent a year reporting on water and water resources in the Northwoods for a WXPR series called The Stream. Before working at WXPR, Ben worked for more than 7 years in news at WJFW TV in Rhinelander. He lives in Rhinelander with his wife, Erica. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you, Ben.
Jane, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to our panelists, and thank you to the folks at League of Women Voters for setting this up. And thanks to everyone that's listening and watching and attending, whether you're doing it live with us right now or whether you are doing it on the recording that's been made available. So I appreciate that introduction, Jane. And let me just set some expectations for how this is going to work today and what we hope to get out of it. So whether the term broadband is brand new to you or whether you know quite a bit but are looking to learn more, we hope you get something out of the program today. And ask lots of questions. These things work really well when we ask questions, when everybody asks questions. I have questions that I can ask our panelists, but I want to put that aside and ask the questions that you have for our panelists and want to know about broadband in the Northwoods. How this will work is I'll introduce each of, each of our panelists one by one, and then ask them to give an introduction and an overview to the status of broadband in their purview, and give a brief presentation, 5 or 10 minutes, on what folks should know about broadband in their world. We've got Kathy Schmitz from the Vilas County Economic Development Corporation, whose purview is Vilas County. Bill Niemuth works with her as the chair of the broadband committee, or on that broadband committee in Vilas County, and is also heavily involved specifically in Boulder Junction and the broadband project in Boulder Junction. Jeff Verdoorn is with Oneida County Economic Development. Mark Ferris is with Forest County Economic Development, executive directors in both of those places. So in just a moment, I'll pass the buck to each of them in turn to let them give you an overview of the landscape of broadband where they are. After that, we want to hear your questions for these panelists, whether it's at large or for one of the specific panelists. The best way to do that is to put your question in the chat. And if you're unfamiliar with how to do that, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a chat icon that will pop up with a new window, a new box. Just go ahead and type your question in there. We'll make sure that it is seen and either answered or combined with another question that's very similar to get answered. You can do that at any time. If a question comes to your mind, well, Kathy is giving her introduction, pop it in then. If a question comes to your mind later, that's great too. Pop it in at any time and I'll see to it that it gets answered. Because this works well if it's interactive instead of my just going back and forth with the panelists. I want to mention to the panelists that a lot of the questions that we have will probably pertain to more than one of you, or more than one of you can provide some valuable insight on. So what I've found with forums like this, what works really well is instead of this being a grill session of my presenting a question and one person answering it, we can treat it more like a conversation where perhaps the first person gives a perspective, another adds on to it, and so on. I think that's a more valuable learning experience for everybody to get the information that they're interested in. So with that, I don't think I've missed anything in terms of ground rules, but let's start with Vilas County and have Kathy and or Bill introduce themselves and give a little overview of broadband in their world in Vilas County and what folks should know.
Sure, thank you, Ben, and I'm happy to start off with that. And first of all, my thanks to the League of Women Voters for the invitation today. This is clearly a very important topic, and we appreciate the time today and the panel that you put together, and obviously with our fabulous host, Ben Meyer. And I am joined by my colleague on our board, Bill Niemuth, and Bill, as Ben says, chairs our Vilas County Economic Development Broadband Work Group Committee. And he has been doing that now for over a year and is fabulous at that, and then also works with his team in Boulder Junction. So what I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes really just talking about, as executive director, the VCEDC and you know, really why we're leading this for Vilas County, and then why broadband is important to us. And then I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and he's going to talk a little bit about really that state of broadband in Vilas County, and then also with his other hat, touch on Boulder as well. So really wanted to just take a step back and help educate you on the Vilas County Economic Development Corporation, for some of you that might not know. So I'm going to call us the VCEDC, another acronym for everybody, right? So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we've been in existence for you know, about a little over 10 years now. And we have a very diverse and skilled working board of directors. And I point to Bill as one of those lead board of directors that we have. And we are most appreciative for his expertise on the board. So ultimately, you know, we are passionate about improving the quality of life and growing and diversifying the economy in the Northwoods. And so in the past year, we have really looked at some alternative funding sources and have received some grants that are helping us to do some very targeted social media and Google ad campaigns, all to recruit remote workers, entrepreneurs, and expanding businesses. And so with COVID, you know, for us, if there was ever a silver lining, it really validated our strategy. And as we've all seen, this huge influx in people moving to the Northwoods. So everyone that we know has either moved here or has had some tie to the area. And so we have that very rich target audience of people that love the Northwoods like we all do, people that grew up here and moved back, vacationed here as a child, which was my case. We vacationed up in Boulder Junction. And I always say this, it's my favorite little town in America. Or perhaps they've had a spouse that's been from here. So, you know, as we expand our broadband coverage, to help them know that they could not only live here, but live and work here and remotely full time. And truly, many people are already doing this. And to do all of this, you know, we have to have robust broadband. So there are places in Vilas County where it is very good. We have very good broadband coverage. And there are places in Vilas County where it's not so good. And ultimately, you know, it's important that we understand that broadband, though, is not the goal. The goal is to diversify and strengthen our economy. It's a step that we have to go through today. And without a doubt, we are an internet and information-driven economy. So at the Vilas County Economic Development Corporation, truly since spring of 2020, we've been focused on making Vilas County a broadband destination, working with the towns, the Lac du Flambeau tribe, the internet service providers, county leadership, state elected officials, all really to provide education, leadership, planning, and support. And so, you know, there's going to be about $40 million in RDOF funding being spent in Vilas County over the next 10 years. And our goal is to partner with the two internet service providers, both Charter Communications and LTD Broadband, who won that RDOF in our county, to really ensure that we put Vilas first when those providers are ready for installation. And so to ensure strong communication with each of our audiences and the general public, we've developed a broadband page on the VCEDC website. And this includes, you know, blogs, articles on broadband, information on Starlink, which is really important and popular right now, information on our broadband work group, news items, and so much more. So the bottom line for us is that we want to help everyone be successful when it comes to broadband. And again, we are most grateful for the League of Women Voters today to help us further communicate that message for Vilas County and our Northwoods. And so with that, delighted to take questions when that piece opens up, but for now, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Bill Niemuth.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to talk about broadband today. And there is a lot to talk about. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of interest and news stories about it, and I think you're going to see this continue. So, where is Vilas County with its broadband quest? And as Kathy said, there are some places with really, really strong broadband today, and then some that are poor. So our goal is to really get everyone on a level playing field, so economies can diversify, so individuals can use the internet, broadband for teleeducation, telehealth, entertainment, and communications. So I'd like to do is show you a map. This is kind of version 1.0 of our mapping in Vilas County. So Ben, help me out. Are you seeing a single slide?
Sure am. I'm seeing a map of Vilas County.
Okay, fantastic. Let me quickly go through this with the participants. So in the old days, telecommunications companies, phone companies, started providing internet services. And way back, that was dial-up service, and that has moved to what's called DSL. Well, this area of Vilas County is served by CenturyLink. This area and this shaded portion is served by Frontier Communications. But in Vilas, we have other internet service providers. And you can see them sprinkled about. SonicNet, which is a fixed wireless company. We have Charter Spectrum Cable, Astria Connect, which is kind of a new company into Vilas County. ChoiceTel, which has significant fiber optic infrastructure in the county. And two other areas that I'll be talking about here momentarily. So that's a snapshot of what we have today in Vilas County. And that's not something that just evolved. That's something that we had to work on. We had many conversations. We had to do research just to figure out who was out there, where they had services. And then once we have that platform, then we continue to build on that platform. So Vilas may be a bit different than some of the other counties where we have 500, 600, 700 miles of fiber optic infrastructure. This is the infrastructure, glass essentially, that carries internet traffic to and from a location. So we have that level of fiber optic infrastructure that's already in the ground. And we have, as you saw on the map, we have a diversity of internet service providers. As Kathy mentioned, we have also had some success with getting certain stakeholders Starlink, which is the new satellite service. And it works differently than traditional satellite services because they're defined as low Earth orbiting satellites. Those are LEOs for short. And our two work group members, or VC EDC work group members who have been testing the system, it's thumbs up all the way. It's really, really good. The challenge is it's not commercialized yet. So they're still in beta testing, but we are very encouraged by what we have found. And then the other, really the current state of where Vilas County is, I showed you the map. That was mapping version 1.0. We're now developing data to give us that mapping level version 2.0. So we have a broadband survey, that's what I call out in the wild, for individuals to fill out, takes 5 minutes to fill out, which gives us data. So far, as of this morning, we have 700 responses. We're looking for a lot more than that, but it's going to give us the data to then jumpstart us over to that version 2.0 of the map. So we know specifically who has internet service, what their service levels are, and specifically those areas that do not have service, because those are the ones that are critical when it comes to grant fundings or grant funding. So current projects. Currently, there are 4 projects in the county that is going to bring high-speed, not just broadband, but high-speed broadband service to about 4,500 homes and businesses. And those are in Boulder Junction, where there's a project to bring high-speed broadband fiber optic to all of the living units. The same with St. Germain. And that's about 2,500 of the living units. The towns of Washington and Lincoln around that Eagle River area, there's a project that's going on right now to deliver high-speed broadband to about 600 homes and businesses. And then there are a couple of fixed wireless projects that are going on in the county as well to hit those really hard to address and expensive to get to areas. So future projects. Kathy talked a little bit about RDOF. RDOF is short for Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It's the next level of federal funding. So we know how much. It's about $40 million in Vilas County over the next 10 years. We know who won the auctions. That was Charter Communications and LTD Broadband. We know where the projects will take place. The big question is when. Broadband expansion is an enormous project, and it's an enormous undertaking. And even big companies like Charter Communications, which is about a $50 billion company, needs to assemble a team. It needs to design all of these systems and then deploy. That all takes time. So in our methodology with Vilas First, we're already working with Charter Communications and LTD Broadband to develop a process so we can efficiently and effectively get high-speed broadband to as many stakeholders as possible. But some of the towns may not want to wait 3 to 10 years. So some are reviewing options and making plans and determining if any of the ISPs, the communities, are interested in filing a grant application for the next round of Wisconsin Public Service Commission grants of $100 million. Those applications need to be submitted by July 27th. So a really, really short runway. We have this program called Broadband Buddies, and our VC-EDC work group has divided all of these communities together, and these are our buddies. We work with them, we give them advice and counsel so they can upgrade their broadband capabilities, and we are encouraging them to be creative, to be aggressive, and to get high-speed broadband into their communities to help their stakeholders, to help their economies. So with that, I'll thank you, Ben, and thank the League of Women Voters, and I'll stand down until there's questions. Thank you.
Oh, and there will be plenty. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. I see Mark Ferris stepped away for a moment. He'll be on deck, and I'll say hello to Jeff Verdoorn, who's the Executive Director of Oneida County Economic Development. And Jeff, we're interested to hear about the view from Oneida County.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation, Ben. It's great to talk to you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters as well for the invitation. So I'm going to share my screen here, and can you see that?
Yep. Yes. Looks good, Jeff.
Okay. So first, who is OCEDC, Oneida County Economic Development Corporation? We're also a local 501c3 corporation. We're not a government entity. We're truly a nonprofit. You can see some of the things we focus on. I'm not going to go down that list, but you can see at the top of the list, we've been working very hard for a number of years on rural broadband expansion. You know, the municipalities, towns, some of the larger towns seem to do okay. How do we get broadband out to, you know, a good share of the Oneida County population is truly rural. We've got all these lakes, we've got trees. How do we get broadband to those locations? So before I start, also, I would just highly encourage you to read an article that came out in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on June 3rd. This is probably one of the better articles I've read in terms of kind of defining the state of rural broadband in Wisconsin. So something up for your reading list, answers a lot of questions. Unfortunately, they, like a lot of us, don't have a great answer in terms of how do you fix it. And that's what we're kind of all grappling with today. So rural broadband expansion, and the way I like to think about this is providing that last mile of service for anything is difficult and expensive. Think of Amazon as an example. They excel in distribution, but what they do is they farm out that last mile of delivery services to the folks that have boots on the ground, so to speak, the infrastructure that already exists. The problem with rural broadband is that infrastructure does not exist. You can run fiber loops, but how do you How do you get the fiber to every house, every rural home? A private company like Charter or some of the local ISPs, they cannot or they won't invest millions of dollars for infrastructure for a small number of subscriptions. There's just not a payback for that effort. And that's really what we've been focusing on in terms of getting grant money to provide to ISPs to be able to get that last mile of service. So if you look at why it's important, I kind of divide it into the haves and have-nots. So if you look at the counties adjoining Oneida County, only 56% of all residents have access to the internet. Think about that. Almost half of our population has lousy to no access and essentially underserved. Then you look at the large metropolitan areas like Dane County, this is the entire county has 97%. Milwaukee County, essentially 100%. So again, you look at it really puts us at a disadvantage in rural Wisconsin compared to what the municipalities have, and also from a speed standpoint as well. So why is it important? And we've really seen it from the standpoint of what's going on in COVID and the post-COVID world. We're extremely disadvantaged here compared to, I see I have a spelling error, I apologize for that. Conducting business as well. People are no longer really tied to their work location. They can live anywhere. What a great opportunity to bring folks to our area, but they won't come if we can't provide access to the internet. Real estate value is also tied to good internet access. And our small businesses are scattered throughout the county, not just in our towns and cities. So again, that's why it's important. So our approach, again, what our goal is to get 90% of Oneida County population access to internet. We can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, but at least we want them to have access. And our approach has been to get grants and in-kind matching contributions in either whether the rural communities themselves, the PSC, internet service providers have provided a lot of dollars for this. Find landowners are willing to help us install towers, and then work with the local internet service providers to be able to provide that. So how have we done? We started this work back in 2014, and we've received 5 grants from the PSC, also the matching contributions from a variety of sources. All told, it's $1.2 million we've invested in broadband infrastructure since 2015. We've got 30 internet towers established at this point, providing service to over 1,000 rural homes and businesses in many areas that essentially there's no other option. Most, in fact, have no other option. The technology we're using is a hub and spoke type wireless system. We use microwaves to go from tower to tower, and then essentially go from the towers line of sight to the households. Again, 30 plus towers so far. There are drawbacks to the technology, however, but these are in areas often where you can't even get fiber to them. It's either cost prohibitive or just essentially impossible. So that's the strategy we've used over the last 7 years. This is an example of a tower that we installed just recently near Hazelhorse, a 200-foot tower. Again, we keep it to 200 feet so there's not intrusive lights. This is on a lake, actually. You can't hardly see it, from the standpoint of being intrusive. It is on private property. Serves a line of sight within a 4-mile radius. So you've got essentially an 8-mile diameter around this tower, and typically we can serve 50 to 100 homes. But again, it's not 100 MB. It's typically 25 or less. These are the towers that we've installed throughout Oneida County in the rural areas. You can see we've covered a good deal of Oneida County. Not everyone in a circle essentially can be reached, however. There's topography issues, there's line of sight type issues, there's other technology that we can employ within the circles to improve the coverage, and it's just going to be a process that has to continue. So again, back to where are we today? Again, I mentioned the 56% in Oneida County. We're sitting at 69%. So we're really doing better than the surrounding counties from the standpoint just because of this effort. And what does that 13% mean? It means we've essentially got 4,600 residents in our county that have access, that didn't have access prior to our works. And again, it's not perfect, it's not fiber, but again, it's something. And I have this service myself, actually. It's the only way I could get internet at this point. and it's very adequate. I can conduct all my business from home, Zoom meetings, etc. And I've got about 15 MB from a download service speed standpoint. So again, what are we doing right now? We're trying to take advantage of the $100 million that's available through the PSC through July 27th. Their focus is going to be more municipality-owned infrastructure. Fiber is a big part of it. And we're working right now to conduct a study in Oneida County, like some of the other counties around us have done, to kind of figure out what is that next step. So future, again, one of the things that's frustrating to me is that the last 2 grants we applied to the PSC for, we were turned down because we were working on last mile approach and using fixed wireless. Their preference is using fiber. However, fiber does not work up here in the Northwoods with lakes, with the topography issues that we have. It's very, very difficult to get fiber to every home. So we've got to get these agencies to understand that there has to be some fixed wireless involved, and that's really what our focus is right now. We know there's a lot of dollars here coming over the course of the next couple of years. How do we grab onto that? It is going to take time, however, to install this infrastructure. So again, that's why we're still pushing some of the fixed wireless to get service to folks now versus having to wait 5 to 7 years for RDOF to come through, as an example. New technology, the low orbit satellites that Bill talked about, that it's promising, but I will also say that it's expensive. I mean, it's a $500 to buy the hardware. It's $100 a month, regardless of there's only one plan available. And from the technological standpoint, what happens as they get more and more customers on this system, we just don't know yet. So the jury is still out. So again, we know we've done some good work. We know we've got a lot of work yet to do. But again, our focus at this point is to continue trying to get that last mile service so that our folks have something, even if it's not necessarily perfect. And so with that, I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Ben.
Jeff, thank you. I appreciate it. You asked what questions you could answer on your last slide, and we'll get there. And I'm sure there will be plenty. We already have plenty. I want to just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves first. So I'll say hello to my friend Mark Ferris in Forest County. It looks like he's in the Crandon office there. Mark, give us an overview of Forest County, where things stand broadband-wise, what's in the works, and where you're going.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you to Kathy, Bill, and Jeff for being so well prepared and giving all the detail. And I think I could take Jeff's slides and just insert Forest County in there, and there'd be an awful lot of similarities. So I'm not going to give you so much information on Forest County Economic Development Partnership, but in terms of FCEDP, we kind of assumed the lead role along with a number of county officials and our broadband committee, which kind of morphed towards a broadband commission. We, again, many similarities with Oneida County topography, the challenges of a county with a population of approximately 9,000 people. The topography is a real challenge, and it was one of the most difficult issues we dealt with when we were interviewing ISP providers. And complicate the fact by what complicates things is the fact that 83% of our land in Forest County is non-taxable land. It is either national forest, state, or tribal or county land, and thus it makes location for towers in our build out made it very difficult. But I'll give you a kind of a brief history. We started the process. Actually, it goes way beyond early 2019, but that's when things became real. It became a very serious topic of conversation with our county government. And at that point, FCDP was asked to put together a broadband committee at that time, and bringing together people with expertise in the technology, our tribal governments, our business leaders, and then people employed in county government, and of course our people in our different school systems. And where we came out of that was we did our best to, if you will, share information with our county board. And about 6 months later in June, it was the county board acted upon putting together a formal broadband commission of the county, which by addition or subtraction, we came up with a little bit different makeup, but we wanted to be well represented and make sure that, you know, everybody's voice was heard. So we then began in earnest taking a look at what our options were. The challenges that Oneida County and Jeff talked about. Truly a digital divide. We had the challenges of lack of accessibility, and also in some cases lack of affordability. We just don't have the providers, didn't have the providers at that time in Forest County that could bring service to our residents. So knowing that we had to take a little different look than fiber, we are actually, perhaps a little known fact, we are the second largest land area for towns in the state of Wisconsin, the town of Hiles with 9,000 people. We stretch over a large span of land. And of course, as Jeff alluded to, you know, the interest at the state level, or I guess at this point, as we're moving forward, is, you know, fiber is the magic word. We have two Native American tribes in our county. And of course, this expansive land area. So we started the process of interviewing providers. And again, thanks to Jeff, because our choice of providers was Northwoods Connect. They had the technology that best fit Forest County. So after interviewing some of these different providers, we came to the conclusion it was Northwoods Connect that was going to make things work. And then we started the process. We worked with Northwoods Connect on the grant process. We were awarded, what I think is really interesting, and we're really appreciative of, we were the only grant applicant of 142 applications for that grant period ending in December of 2019. And we were fortunate. We were awarded a grant of $939,000 and some odd cents, and our county government match was $750,000. Northwoods Connect estimated some additional funds that they would put into the build out, and where we ended up is approximately about $2 million to $2.1 million in a total build out in Forest County. Again, similar to Oneida County, our goal was to meet 90% of residents in Forest County. Building or the use of 17 towers strategically located through the county. And so, you know, actually, I guess it was April, because of the delay with COVID of 2020, when the actual grant awards were issued, we were one of 72 grant awards. And again, with COVID, what was supposed to be you have a 2-year, 24-month period to complete the build out, that got delayed until October of 2020. So our completion date is October of 2022. Northwoods started the build out. Certainly different complications that I think people need to be aware of is related to COVID is availability of materials and supply chain. It's been a real issue. We're appreciative of Northwoods Connect because I think they saw it coming. And we have some tower materials that are sitting in our industrial park right now, and they're busy putting up towers. There is a new Wisconsin Public Service tower that's going up in the city of Crandon, which is kind of almost a centerpiece, if you will. The way this type of technology works is, it's kind of a connect to the dots. And of course, we're, again, a very large area. But the build out is in process. We believe our build out is reaching a large number of people that have not had availability of service. Again, very limited by which providers exist in Forest County. We're pretty much frontier, and there are some spots where CenturyLink and Astria are at, formerly Packerland. And we are getting some fiber around Lake Mintongo, which is one of our more populated areas. So they are getting fiber, and that's kind of what Northwoods kind of added to the mix there. So, and again, I'll speak as a customer of Northwoods Connect, where we were getting with the provider we had, typically 5 to 7 megs down. We're now at 23 to 24 megs down, and we own a business, so that's important to us that we have availability for our customers, our guests, and that whole piece that was talked about earlier about working remotely and the issues with education. We identified when we were approaching this and getting the buy-in from our county board was, we identified emergency services, which has a lot of gaps. We did not have connectivity with all of our residents throughout the county. It was very challenging for law enforcement and rescue and those kind of things. So emergency services, education, and then e-health, e-medicine. We had a longer list of why it was so critical, but we really wanted to zero in and try to provide a target. And then, of course, economic development kind of is, that overlays everything. And so, we were fortunate. I think our need was certainly great in Forest County with lack of service. Where we go next from here is, we'll be looking at the additional grant money that's come out and that has, been allocated. But again, you talk about the Starlinks. The Starlink, as Jeff referred to, we are, honestly, we are a county that has some issues with family incomes and those kind of things. So when you talk about, signing up for a Starlink at $500 and then $100 a month, that's a real challenge. So, we'd love to think that can be the solution for some, but it doesn't fit everybody in our county. And just as it's the same issue probably in Oneida and certainly families in other surrounding counties, Vilas, Oconto County. We have to take a look at every option that's available. Again, the topography is a huge issue here. And while we're doing this build out, we now have 2 or 3 towers that are live. And quite honestly, I've had residents come to me and say, yeah, but it doesn't work for us. And as recently as yesterday, and happens to be a neighbor that lives a mile from us. But again, the dense timber that we have and rolling hills and that kind of thing, it just doesn't offer the solution that fiber does. But, we're going to continue working on it. I'm grateful and appreciative to Brittany Beyer from Grow North and what her efforts are and what she's accomplished with the State Broadband Task Force and and now what will be a regional initiative. I think we all need to be talking together to figure out these different solutions. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at. I have great confidence in Northwoods Connect. And a lot of that, and honestly, Jeff, that goes to what their experience and success has been in Oneida County, because we mirror Oneida County in so many ways. So a lot of work to be done. And I'm going to mention one other little piece here, because we're working with a company that Ben is familiar with, and some folks probably in Vilas County. We're working with a company called Whisk Lift, and I'd encourage everybody to take a look at their website. It's WISCLIFT.com. It's a dynamic platform for broadband, internet, and cellular service, and they are doing some very unique things, and we're fortunate to have them bringing this technology to market, and with what's intended to be a base in Forest County. If you get an opportunity, this Whiskcliffe technology can be a technology that can be extremely valuable in emergency services work, education. It is literally, I guess, as Scott Williams would describe it, it is literally a flying cell tower, or flying broadband tower. It's a tethered drone that has equipment mounted on it that can be moved, located by need, and they're doing some really interesting things. They're actually going to be presenting at a major event at Volk Field to approximately 1,000 emergency management people from around the country next week. So again, I think, you know, there's just so many different things that are out there. We hope that we can all, as you know, the Northwoods counties can all be successful in getting people what they need, so they can, I think Kathy said it best, is to provide that quality of life that is absolutely imperative to everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Let's get to the questions that our attendees have for our panelists. I have some that were emailed in advance. I see many in the chat box. Feel free to continue putting them in the chat box. What I'm going to try to do is, there are some questions that are on, multiple questions on similar topics, which indicates to me that that's a question lots of people want to know, whether it's through email in advance or in the chat box. I'm going to try to amalgamate those to answer as many questions as efficiently as possible. So if your question doesn't get answered right away, be patient, and if time allows, we'll hopefully get there. But first, I had a couple of questions that were emailed in advance that were kind of terminology and basic understanding based. And I think I'm going to start with Bill on this question, but again, as I indicated, if other panelists want to add on, please do. I think a lot of people, myself included, as recently as a year or two ago, were a little bit confused about all the terms flying at us. What's broadband? What's DSL? What's satellite? What's fiber optic? What's fixed wireless? They all sound like computery, internet-y things that it's hard to differentiate. Bill, can you just kind of take us through the differences between broadband and DSL and fixed wireless and fiber optic?
Sure, Ben. So let's just start off with broadband. For whatever reason, broadband became the term for the internet. And it's really more of the delivery mechanism to provide stakeholder internet services. So that's really a generic term. So let's talk about delivery mechanisms for a while. I mentioned dial-up before. Well, dial-up was the old way where you took a connector and you stuck it into a phone, and you were able to dial up and get your email. And back in those days, that's about all you could do. All of that used copper lines, copper telephone lines. So the next evolution of that used copper telephone lines, but in a hybrid way. So telecommunications providers like Frontier and CenturyLink, they started moving their infrastructure, their data highways, to fiber optic cables 30 years ago. I mean, so, you know, their use of fiber optic cable for data conveyance is not new. But what they did with DSL, which is direct service line, DSL, was to take that fiber, put it to what's called a node, where that glass connects to the copper lines that go to your homes and businesses. That is DSL. To fit in what when Mark and Jeff talked about, to fit hard to reach areas, there's this technology that's called fixed wireless. And essentially it's radio frequencies from a high point, it could be a tower, it could be a tall building, to a living unit, a home or a business, wirelessly. And usually depending upon the technology, you have to have line of sight to make that work. So from the home or business, the antenna on that home or business to the antenna on the tower, there needs to be a line of sight. And then let's talk about satellite services for a moment, because that's also utilizing radio frequency, RF. And with traditional satellites, they can be 5,000 miles, 5 to 8,000 miles above the Earth. So from your home or business, if you have an antenna outside, a dish, it is uploading and downloading data from that satellite that's way, way, way above the Earth. It works okay, but there's a delay because of the distance. So in comes a technology like Starlink, which is a low Earth orbiting satellite, anywhere between 800 and 2,000 miles above the Earth. So much closer to the Earth than the traditional satellites. And what that does, just simply, it makes that connectivity time shorter. So it's faster, and it's as fast as DSL, which is buried in the ground. And then fiber. Fiber optic cable is cables with all kinds of strands of glass. And glass is an unbelievable conduit of light. And that is what is transmitted on that fiber until it gets to a point, and let's call this a junction point, where it changes that light, and this is light that's emitting, to data. It's like magic, but it works extremely well. It's kind of like the speed of light, you know. And the speeds, the broadband speeds offered by fiber, it's nearly unlimited. So what might be a gigabit download today, 5 years from now could be 10 gigabits, 7 years from now could be 100 gigabits. Ben, I hope that helps a little bit, but Kathy, Jeff, or Mark might have additional.
Well, and if I can just ask for the clarity of the folks that are listening, in general, is it fair to say that in terms of internet speeds and capacity to transmit information, right now that the hierarchy is kind of fiber optic at the top, fixed wireless next, DSL satellite next in line? Is that basically true with some variations, or am I off a little bit? Right now it's fiber, Starlink. They've upgraded their network to about 300 megabits download.
depending upon the technologies, DSL and fixed wireless can be neck and neck. So that's kind of the hierarchy.
Got it. Thank you. Others that want to chime in on that? Otherwise, we'll go to another question.
I think, Ben, too, to take off on what Bill said, it also depends on the packages that you buy, because some ISPs offer different level packages depending on pricing. So that can also impact your speeds and your service as well.
Thank you. The next question is kind of a combination. Well, I see Jeff has pulled something up here, and I'm going to let him speak on that briefly if you want, Jeff.
Yeah, so if you kind of look on conjunction with why speed is important. And right now the standard speed is 25 megabits per second download or greater as the absolute minimum. 10 years ago when Frontier got the first RDOF type grant, they were only required to deliver 10. You can see when you start getting down below 10, you really lose that functionality that folks look for today. You know, the high-speed downloads, the streaming, multiple devices in a home. So when you think about broadband, it's just really talking about speed of the internet and the capacity, how big the pipe is to be able to deliver stuff to your computer. So right now, that kind of the minimum standard is 25. You can pretty much do anything you want, 25 or greater. And then above 25, between 25 and 100, things will just happen faster, whether it happens, you know, within a few seconds versus maybe 5 seconds, or if your computer has to buffer, et cetera. So think about it, 25 is the minimum. A lot of the technologies, fixed wireless and below, are less than 25 right now. I have 15. I'm able to do everything I need to do, but I can't do some of the advanced stuff. So again, speed is important, and it's really a capacity issue.
Thank you. Jeff, I'm going to start out with you on the next question, which is kind of an amalgamation of questions I see from both Sue and Louise, and it has to do with it ties into one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, that many Northwoods counties, including the counties that are represented here, lag way behind in getting people covered or giving options for broadband internet to urban counties in Wisconsin, way behind Milwaukee County, way behind Dane County, for example. To Sue's question, she wants to know why it's taken so dang long, basically, for accessible, reliable broadband to reach the Northwoods at a great scale, when it seems like it's doing much better in southern Wisconsin. And then kind of tied in with that, Louise asks what accounts for the variations between counties here in the Northwoods. Why, she mentioned she lives in Lincoln County. It seems like Lincoln County is behind other counties. So why is the Northwoods as a whole seem to be a bit behind, and what accounts for the variation between counties in our region here?
It's a real simple answer to that question, and it's because we have not made internet access a utility. And that's why that Milwaukee Journal Sentinel article is so good at explaining that. If it was a utility like electricity, we would be working like crazy to wire everybody up because it's assumed essential. Right now, up until now, for the most part, broadband is a private enterprise type system, and a company is just not going to spend millions of dollars to run fiber to 10 households. It doesn't make financial sense. The reason that we're starting to see movement in the Northwoods is that organizations are starting to go out and get grants, they're getting matching contributions to be able to provide that infrastructure to the internet service providers, so they're not have this massive capital outlay with no return. You know, the infrastructure is put in place first, and then the ISPs take advantage of that to be able to serve the customers and make a profit. So that's the delay. I think COVID has jump-started all of this. And also you look at the Northwoods, for the most part, folks that didn't have internet, you know, we didn't care that much about it. Now that with COVID, now that business has said, you know, I have to work from home. I worked from home all last year. I didn't have internet a year ago. And so I essentially signed up and got it because I had to have it in order to do my job. So there's a whole bunch of things working to drive it, but we're certainly way behind where they are in the big cities.
And I think, Ben, if I could just add on to what Jeff said, you
Please.
know, we're in the midst of a whole culture shift here, right? So some of the things that we've heard from people, and I'll cite a remote worker event that we just held about a month ago. We had about 30 remote workers up here from the Northwoods on a Zoom meeting with us over lunch, really talking about that culture shift that, you know, years ago, people came to the Northwoods to vacation, right? You came away from the city to come up here, enjoy the beautiful Northwoods, go fishing, go hiking, whatever your pleasure was, to get away from all of that, to get away from the office, the busyness of the city, the phones. And so your cabin or your home was not equipped with all of that. As a matter of fact, it didn't even have an office. So now, as you know, Jeff and we were all talking about with COVID, is that has really spurred all of this to actually have people come up here and understand, as we talked, at least in Vilas County, that there are some very good places with broadband. There are some that are not, that we're clearly working on. So that's been a real mind shift for people, but it's something that we clearly are working on. We believe Vilas County stands out. There will be some things coming out about that that we're going to be very proud of. We have been featured in many media stories because of the work that's been done here in Vilas County. But I would say that there has been that culture shift, and people are finding out that they can live and work successfully here, at least in our county. So I would suspect that that mind shift is happening really throughout that Northwoods.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Jeff. I want to get to a couple of issues about satellites and LEO and that acronym for broadband being provided by satellite. I see a couple of questions here from Dorothy. Sounds like there are capacity issues with LEO. In her understanding, she's wondering if it works reliable in all weather conditions. And I also heard some optimism, but also some concerns from different folks on the panel. So I'm curious to hear a little bit perhaps from each of you on what's your level of optimism in terms of satellite as a viable broadband option for folks in the Northwoods? I'm going to start with Mark, because Mark, you said that you've got some concerns in different ways, but is it part of the solution in Forest County, potentially?
Well, I think it can be for certain people, but again, it's an economic issue. It's a financial issue for those that, you know, perhaps might love the idea of Starlink. But again, we have a lot of people here on fixed incomes. We have, you know, if we were to take a look at the demographics across the Northwoods, we would be, unfortunately, the reality is we look at Forest County incomes and I think it's just something that could be very difficult for certain families. So that's, you know, I've, you know, registered for Starlink and hope it could provide some of those solutions, but again, you know, and we've had many questions from people. Boy, that Starlink just sounds so great. But, you know, when and at what cost? And, you know, again, we're a little different population, and we have to deal with that reality. So.
Vilas County folks, either Bill or Kathy, what's your level of optimism on a Starlink or a LEO being a viable option? And if you have any knowledge on either capacity issues or weather affecting satellite internet connection, chime in with that as well.
You know, I'll let Bill take that first, but if I had to make any introductory comments on it, I would just take off on what Bill said earlier, is that the people who have gotten it so far absolutely love it. They are getting great speeds. They're getting great reliability. The the dishes themselves have heaters in them, so the snow melts off. I have seen them in person, and they are able to have two people working from home with a child or two doing homework and on the computer, you know, doing very well. And this is a gentleman, Jonathan Sharp, on our broadband work group committee, who communicates with Tokyo and around the world every day. So, and that's what he's powering his system off of. So I think it's working very well. I think it's going to ultimately be a combination of things, Ben. There is no one size fits all for Vilas County. I know that there's, well, I've had conversations with many people who have, because of COVID, you know, moved to the Northwoods, you know, from Chicago, Minneapolis, Milwaukee area, where they are used to just someone coming in and taking care of it. And we're having to really educate people that that's what we're all working towards here in the Northwoods. It's just going to take a little bit more time. So, but it is not one size fits all where a charter or someone can just come in and just take care of it next week. So we're just asking people to be very, very patient with it. But ultimately, I think Starlink so far has been fabulous, but I think it's going to be a combination of things, you know, and it's going to take that, you know, that 3 to 10 years to make it all happen.
Hey, if I could, Ben,
Please,
go
Mike.
back to a comment I think Bill made. Broadband, it needs to be viewed as a necessity, a utility. And the other comment on, you know, what we deal with in terms of, you know, who can get what level of service, it all comes down to the provider ROI, return on investment. And we can't, those conversations, and I think Jeff said the same thing, is, you know, we have a difficult time having those conversations because unfortunately, you know, some of those providers don't wish to have that conversation if they know what the realistic ROI is.
Bill, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, Ben, regarding the LEOs and specifically Starlink, it's a game changer. There's no question about it. The testing that our two work group members have done just shows that it's a tremendous leap forward from a technological perspective. And we have to remember Starlink's network is still being built, and there's detail to that. They are building that network like nobody else has. And so I believe, for, as Kathy said, it's going to be a different size that fits all. So if there are a cluster of properties, let's say if there are 5 properties that are in a hard to reach area with a fixed wireless, it costs $1 million to get fiber there. Starlink can be a solution. And then let me say one other thing. There is a fund, it's called the FCC Emergency Broadband Fund, and it has billions of dollars in it now, and it provides families up to $75 a month to pay for broadband service with a one-time $100 essentially grant for the purchase of technology. So there's all kinds of resources out there. So the affordability issue, our elected officials are trying to make that a non-issue.
Thanks, Bill. And I think you either intentionally or inadvertently answered, at least in part, one of Louise's questions I see here. She asked, do we need to make broadband access a function of social services for those who can't afford the service? And it sounds like there's a pot there for those folks, but I would guess that getting the word out about it is a bit of a challenge, because I'm guessing the vast majority of folks that are listening right now haven't heard of the fund. That you
now we all know.
Thanks, Bill. I have a couple more questions. I'm going to send this one to Jeff first, because he mentioned the big problem in his eyes, and why the Northwoods is a bit behind, is because we're not treating broadband like a utility. We're not treating broadband like, say, electricity or natural gas. Like for those of us who are on Wisconsin Public Service to get electricity or natural gas, we know the prices are regulated by the government, so they can't raise it, and we know we'll have service. Internet is not functioning that way. And so Dorothy wants to know what would happen if we did regulate ISPs and declared them a public utility. Similar question from Jane. How would we as voters go about getting broadband designated as a utility? So I'm curious, Jeff, do you have any kind of a vision of the mechanics of how you might go about doing something like that?
And again, I've talked to a number of folks on this. My fear is that train has pretty much left the station with just how powerful the ISPs have become. And if you go back and look how electricity became a utility, what came of it? Essentially, the number of co-ops, and eventually they get absorbed and they're regulated, and the private entities essentially get out of it. I just don't think that there's just too many big ISPs in the mix right now to allow that to happen. So then the next step is, okay, how do you regulate it? How do you support it essentially for low income? I think all that's being worked out. Unfortunately, right now, I think the plan is we're just throwing money at it. So I'm not sure where it's going to come out.
Other thoughts on the regulation or lack thereof of ISPs, internet service providers? Apparently Jeff said it well.
I agree.
Go ahead, Bill.
I agree with Jeff. The train has left the station, and I think and Kathy touched on this, everything in our culture is changing almost 180 degrees. This broadband area is going to change and evolve very, very rapidly. And like we see just about with everything else, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but we're probably about to see a tremendous amount of consolidation.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Jeff. I see a question here from Mike that I certainly am not equipped to answer, and I don't know who would be best to equip to answer, so chime in whoever. Mike says, Madison has DaneNet, which is a municipal broadband which is limited to seniors and low-income populations. Is there a possibility of creating something similar in the Northwoods? Anyone want to take a crack at that one?
Well, just hazard a guess. It's fiber-based. And I would guess, and how does that fit in the Northwoods environment? Just a guess.
Ben, we as we started with our journey in Boulder Junction, one of the options that we did consider is developing or creating a co-op, which kind of fits in that municipal realm. But starting an organization from scratch is difficult enough. So you may already have 2 or 3 years of delay before you build that organization. We just felt that it wasn't appropriate to do that. I think a community or a municipality, if they wanted to go that direction, they may be able to, but there are significant challenges, and one of which is just getting that broadband connectivity, either fiber or fixed wireless there, just to start with. So there's it's a challenge.
And I think if we can add,
Please, Jeff, yes.
There are state laws from the standpoint of what a municipality can do. They can't do the last mile, so to speak, or to actually be able to bill a customer. They can put the infrastructure in place for an ISP to use it. So there's also hurdles from a regulatory standpoint that have to get undone. And then, to form a co-op right now, you also would have to essentially engage the ISPs because they would not like that. And yet, so you end up with that pushback as well. So it's just not something that a municipality can really do right now. They're just not equipped to do it.
Jeff, I'm going to ask a question to you again that I see you answered of Dorothy's in the chat, but for the benefit of everyone listening or listening on the recording, she asked, can the cost of fiber be brought down by methods of laying the fiber that don't require digging a trench? Fiber is super reliable and super fast, but it's expensive on the front end. So can you talk about that?
So the cost to lay fiber is estimated anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 per mile, depending on, kind of where you're doing it. If you were to take that same fiber, the actual cost of the fiber itself is very inexpensive compared to the cost of the conduit and getting it into the ground. So you could take that same fiber, run it on a telephone pole as an example. The problem is the maintenance of that where it's exposed becomes cost prohibitive, and you won't see anybody wanting to take something like delicate like a fiber bundle and essentially have it above ground. If it's below ground, it'll last 25, 30 years, set it, forget it, very little maintenance. Above ground, it's a big problem. So you can lower the cost to get fiber, but then you sacrifice on the maintenance cost and reliability.
Perhaps a related question, Jeff, that Jane just put in. She says, Wisconsin Public Service has been burying electrical lines in Oneida County for the last 3 years. I think it might have even been longer than that, and I think it's happening in more counties than just Oneida as well. She thinks she has a solution. Why can't we just bury fiber at the same time we're burying electric lines?
Huge mistake from the standpoint of the state of Wisconsin and the PSC. We didn't require WPS to bury, to run the fiber with the power lines that were buried. We need, from the state perspective, to have a dig once policy. If we're going to run anything underground, we run fiber with that, because it's not that expensive to add on. So again, that's another one where the train has kind of left the station. WPS has buried tremendous amount. All my lines are buried now, where they weren't just a year ago. But they did not like fiber. I asked the gentleman as he was putting the power line in, why aren't you putting fiber in? It's because we're not required to do so.
So Jane, your solution is not at all off base. It's just a couple years too late, perhaps, unfortunately. Others on that topic at all? Or any of the topics that I didn't do a good enough job of asking for other input on? Otherwise, we'll go to another question.
No, Ben, what I would just add, just fabulous, discussion and collaboration among everyone here, that this is exactly what all of the towns, at least that we're speaking to in Vilas County, and I would imagine the others are struggling with, right? There's all of this money that's coming down now from the American Rescue Act and others. And the towns now are sitting back. And as Bill said earlier, do we wait for the RDOF? Because that doesn't cover everything. But then do we go ahead and apply for the PSC grants? And then what does that look like? And do we go with fiber? Do we go with fixed wireless? What do we do? And so that's where, at least, for the VCEDC, we've been able to have that one-on-one communication with them and help that planning and support and education to help them work through that. But there's a lot of that conversation happening that, a lot of people don't know what they don't know yet. And so, as Bill said earlier, there's more questions than answers right now. And I think we'll know more of those answers this summer, but it's a conversation that is still ongoing right now.
I want to end with this. I see we're coming near to the end of our time, so I'm going to take moderator license to ask one of my own questions. And I'll ask each of you to respond just very briefly, because we're running short on time. But I think it's easy probably for people to immediately think about themselves and their own families and what access to broadband they have, and be very frustrated if they don't have it. But for those of us who are live on this meeting, most of us, you're doing so because you are blessed with broadband at your home or office, or at a place where you're at your home or where you can access broadband. So my question is, I'll start with Mark. For people that do have broadband in the Northwoods right now, why should we care about our neighbor or someone who lives in a different part of the Northwoods that doesn't have broadband? Why should we care about that next guy or next woman who doesn't have it, whether it's a business or an individual? I'll start with Mark.
Well, it could be life or death. I mean, again, emergency management and emergency services here in Forest County was identified, honestly, Ben, as #1 priority, because we don't have connectivity. And, you know, maybe it's overused, but it's that saying, we're all in this together. And for so many different reasons, we need everyone to be connected. We need our kids to have the education that every child deserves. We need the access to e-medicine and e-health that again, we're a demographic here in Forest County. Our at or near retirement age group is 40% higher than the average county. You get people that are you know, getting health services that have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to Wausau, Marshfield, Madison. Again, it's just a necessity. And you know, we wouldn't expect our neighbor to go without lights or heat. We shouldn't expect our neighbors to be without access to internet.
Briefly, Vilas County folks, Kathy and Bill, same question.
Sure, and I agree with everything that Mark just said, and I'll go back to some comments I made earlier that, you know, broadband is not the goal. The goal is to strengthen our economy, have a vibrant economy for everyone. And one of the brief stories I would like to share is one that touched me very deeply with a woman that we've been working with in St. Germain, and she works as a nurse for one of the health systems, and she's a single mom, moved here from Green Bay. And she has been having a very challenging time getting hooked up with her internet service provider at her home. And so she reached out to us. We get about 4 or 5 phone calls a day from, or a week, I should say, from people interested to see if we can help them, and we do everything we can for them. But every night she takes her daughter in her car after work, and she drives her to the McDonald's parking lot. And that's where her daughter does her homework, either in the car or in McDonald's. And that's not okay. And so as Vilas County, as a Northwoods, we need to change that. And that's just one story, because we know that happens a lot around the Northwoods. And it behooves us, all of us as leaders in this region, to help that mom and so many others do something about that, so that we can provide and strengthen that economy for our children that are coming up after us in this world.
Thanks, Kathy. Bill?
Well, and Ben, Kathy has this spot on. It's really about, it's about the quality of life, but it's about the economic diversity and the strength that this creates, so we can build, we can create the future that we need to have, and make our area very, very competitive with everybody else, because we're not the only ones that are going through this. And I may just throw this out. So I run a global consulting firm from my home in Boulder Junction, and we are blessed to have DSL 25 meg download and about 2 meg upload. It's not nearly enough, because I am transferring files and uploading more and more and more things to the cloud, and these files are big. It doesn't cut it. And if my small little business is having problems, how are we going to get more significant small businesses and even medium-sized businesses here? It's tough.
Thanks, Bill. Jeff, I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, the analogy that I'd use is, I live in western Oneida County. Why should I care if my tax dollars are spent on a road in eastern Oneida County? And that's the attitude that we have to have. And right now, we're not thinking of broadband as something that's essential. That culture shift, we've got to drive it. Those of us who are talking about this and having meetings like this have to drive that expectations. Right now, I guarantee the county supervisors are thinking they'd rather use the stimulus dollars for roads versus using it for broadband. So there's got to be communication and education on our part.
Thanks, Jeff. I want to thank everybody. Jeff Verdoorn is the Executive Director of the Oneida County Economic Development Corporation. Kathy Schmidt holds the same position in Vilas County, true for Mark Ferris in Forest County, and Bill Niemuth is on the Broadband Expansion Committee in Vilas County and involved in Boulder Junction's project as well. So thanks to all you panelists and thanks to the league. Thanks for the folks that have attended. Jane, here it is to you.
Thank you, Ben. We'd like to thank you and all of the panelists, not only for attending our program, but working so hard on the behalf of your, residents in your counties. Advocates are needed. And so, and it's clear that you're doing the best you can with some pretty sticky situations. And it's really appreciated. What you're doing and the passion that you're doing it with. So thank you very much for that. And that's pretty much the end of our meeting. I don't know if we have an announcement for the next meeting. I believe our next public meeting will be in August, but I'm not sure. Anyone want to chime in on that? Okay, go to the league website. I would encourage all of our participants, whether you're league member, if you're not league members, to join the league because it gives you another voice. The League of Women Voters is political in that it can take positions, but not partisan in that it doesn't promote parties. So there are positions that the league has for all kinds of issues, and I'm sure that internet is one of them. So I would encourage all of you to consider joining the league and using that as a tool, and we can help you. So thank you so much for everybody.
Thank you.